What separates man from ape? It's a question that has many answers. Is it our intelligence? Is it our ability to speak or use tools? There's several answers, but each answer comes with an assumption that humans and apes are or should be completely separate. But what if they weren't? What if the intelligence of a human could be combined with the savage power of a wild ape? It sounds like the realm of science fiction, but one man would make it his mission to turn it into science fact. This is the story of Ilya Ivanov and his insane quest to create hybrid ape men. Ilya Ivanovich Ivanov was born to a wealthy Russian family in 1870. He graduated with a degree in physiology from Kharkiv in 1896 and proceeded to study bacteriology in Paris until 1898. It was over the course of these studies that he became fascinated with the intricacies of reproduction. Back in Russia, Ivanov's attention quickly fell upon artificial insemination for animals. It was a new frontier of veterinary science at the time. Only a handful of successful artificial inseminations had ever been recorded, but Ivanov wanted to develop it in new ways. His early research focused mostly on horses, since breeding farms were widespread and a lot of attention was paid to ensure good horses passed on their genes to new generations. Ivanov was met with criticism and moral outrage at first. The Russian Orthodox Church condemned his research as immoral, and the Moscow Agricultural Institute declared it was potentially dangerous as they interfered with the natural process of reproduction. However, for all his critics, he received plenty of support too. In 1900, Tsar Nicholas II noted the potential of Ivanov's methods for breeding horses and gave him a grant of 2,500 rubles. Then in 1908, he received funds to establish a full laboratory for his work. He also received support from many of Russia's leading scientists. These included Russia's first Nobel Prize winner, Ivan Pavlov, whose work on digestion and animal conditioning still makes him a household name, and Yuri Filipchenko, the founding father of Russian genetic science. By 1909, Ivanov was teaching his methods to academics and animal breeders and would personally conduct the artificial process for almost 7,000 horses and over 1,000 sheep by 1914. Thanks to his work, Russia was the global leader in the field. But there was another side to his research that was far more disturbing. History remembers the mad scientists, the ones who pushed boundaries without asking if they should. But it forgets the soldiers who made impossible choices in seconds. The ones who didn't experiment with life, but gave theirs a way to save others. That's why we started Project Dogtag. We refuse to let the most outrageous acts in our history fade into nothing. Our first drop commemorates Lieutenant John R. Fox. In 1944, he called in an artillery strike on his own coordinates. His position in an Italian village was being overrun. Enemy forces closing in. His men trapped. Fox grabbed the radio and gave the order that would kill him because it was the only way to save his soldiers and stop the advance. He didn't hold the line, he became it. We're making only 500 pieces. Each piece serves as a personal monument, a commitment to wear Fox's name, tell his story, and refuse to let his sacrifice become a forgotten statistic. And because remembrance means action, we're donating $5 from every piece to veteran support organizations. We'll share exactly where these funds go and provide regular updates on our impact. The collection is live now. You can be an early member of this movement and secure your piece of history with a 35% discount. Head to projectdogtag.com. Use code LTFOX35 at checkout. Link in the description. Artificial insemination was, at its core, a way to make reproduction happen where it wouldn't usually do so. Maybe medical issues prevented normal reproduction, or the two animals the owner wanted to breed just weren't interested. But Ivanov soon realized it could be used for much more. What if it could be used to create pairings from entirely different species? His early tests tried to create hybrids between different types of birds or small mammals. In 1905, he befriended an eccentric nobleman named Friedrich Falsfein, who had turned his 35,000-acre estate in Askania Nova in southern Russia into the country's largest nature reserve, complete with imported exotic animals. Falsfein invited Ivanov to set up a research station there with free rein to conduct whatever experiments he saw fit. Ivanov quickly got to work with the reserve's diverse species. These included ostriches, camels, and even kangaroos. His experiments included the crossing of a zebra and a horse to create a zebroid. Although he was not the first to do this. The zebroid was more capable of doing farm work and load carrying than a zebra, making it an objective improvement in the eyes of farmers or anyone else who might need working animals. But Ivanov wanted to push it further. While speaking at the International Zoology Congress at Graz in 1910, Ivanov speculated that a hybrid could be created between two other closely related animals, humans and apes. The idea of such a combination was morally repulsive to most, but Ivanov had not developed his artificial insemination techniques for nothing. It might be possible, he argued, to artificially implant human sperm into a female ape and produce a hybrid with the intelligence of a human being, but the savage strength of an ape. Ivanov left the theory as a mere theory for now. His hypothesis was only barely acceptable in an academic discussion, and there was no way the Tsar, the Church, or the imperial scientific authorities would ever approve such an experiment. Little did he know, he wouldn't have to worry about their approval for much longer. Every Russian's life was transformed when the revolution erupted in 1917. The political chaos, followed by economic collapse and devastating civil war, halted Ivanov's experiments in their tracks. His noble friend Falsfine fled, and his massive nature reserve was soon abandoned. Ivanov also lost the prestige and funding that had come from the Tsar's support and found himself ejected from the many of his high-ranking positions in the chaos. He was to establish his own central experimentation station of the reproduction of domestic animals in Moscow with the approval of the new Bolshevik Commissariat of Agriculture. But the Bolsheviks had more important things to fund than Ivanov's niche research. It took until 1921 for him to even be given enough funding to even purchase equipment to resume his experiments, and he had to go to France and Germany to buy it himself. It was so bad that Ivanov considered leaving Russia altogether. But post-war Europe offered few opportunities. Besides, with the change came opportunity. Years of waiting and theorizing had only fueled his forbidden obsession. Now with the Tsar and the old order gone, he was free of the moral constraints of the past. The Bolsheviks were happy to turn a blind eye to what other people considered to be immoral or unnatural. Ivanov didn't get a laboratory to work with until 1924, but he hit the ground running. Since Russia was not home to apes, he contacted his associates at the Institut Pasteur in Paris for permission to use their chimpanzee research facility in French Guinea, West Africa. With that permission in hand, he petitioned the Bolshevik government directly for $15,000, the equivalent of about $280,000 today, to fund that research. The Soviet government was more than eager. It wasn't just that they had a scientific interest in Ivanov's work. The communists wanted to present themselves as the future of humanity. So being able to boast of breaking new frontiers of research was a huge goal. The fact that it was morally questionable and went directly against Christian teachings that most regular Russians still followed wasn't an obstacle. In fact, it was an advantage. The topic proposed by Professor Ivanov, wrote one Soviet official, should become a decisive blow to the religious teachings and may be aptly used in our propaganda and in our struggle for the liberation of working people from the power of the church. Ivanov's proposal received approval from the highest levels of government. Nikolai Petrovich Gorbanov, Lenin's administrator of affairs and formal personal secretary, presented the project proposal to the government's Financial Commission for the realization of Professor Ivanov's scientific work on the hybridization of anthropoid apes in Africa. With a giant stamp of Soviet approval, Ivanov was finally able to get to work. Ivanov arrived in West Africa in March 1926, but immediately ran into problems. The French chimpanzee facility in Kindia was not everything it was promised. The facility's staff were poorly trained and had lost half of their animals since being founded just 3 years earlier. These facts had apparently been hidden from their superiors back in Paris. Nevertheless, Ivanov pressed on with his work, but quickly hit an impossible roadblock. No matter how hard he tried, for some reason he could not extract sperm or eggs from any of the chimps. Puzzled, he ordered surgical investigations and made an embarrassing discovery. None of the chimps in Kindia had gone through puberty. They were all still children. Less than a month after arriving, Ivanov boarded a ship back to Paris, empty-handed. He spent the next few months in France trying to find alternative sources of chimps and additional funding. He considered doing a lecture tour in America to raise money. But he was warned that his experiments would likely cause public outrage if he talked about them in the States. Eventually, Ivanov secured access to the chimps at the Colonial Botanical Gardens in the French Guinean capital at Conakry and set out again in November 1926. This time, Ivanov arrived with an assistant, his 22-year-old son, Ilya Ilyich Ivanov. He also had the support of French Guinea's governor Jean-Louis Poiret, who provided him with funds and permission to capture new chimps for his experiments. The Ivanovs proceeded to acquire 3 chimps on a hunting expedition and purchased another 10 from local hunters. Finally, Ivanov could get to work. On the morning of February 28, 1927, Ivanov ordered 2 female chimpanzees named Babette and Civet to be secured with nets and ropes in their cages. The cages were moved out of sight since Ivanov was afraid that the mostly African employees of the facility would take issue with what he was about to do. Only Ivanov and his son remained for the experiment. It was dangerous work. The chimps were fully conscious and had fought back in previous examinations. Each of us had a Browning pistol in the pocket, just in case, he wrote in his diary. After securing them, they injected sperm donated from an unidentified local man into both animals. Then, they waited. Nothing happened. The experiment failed to produce a pregnancy. Undeterred, Ivanov tried again with a 3rd chimp named Black on June 25th. This time, they knocked the chimp out first before injecting, but had no more success. This wasn't surprising. The success rate of the artificial procedure was low in all animals, even humans, and 3 experiments simply weren't enough to write off the project completely. But acquiring chimps was complicated and expensive. It was then that Ivanov began exploring a radical alternative. He saw no reason why the human-ape hybrid couldn't be implanted in a human instead. In truth, Ivanov had considered the idea earlier in 1926. A French doctor traveling on the ship with Ivanov in November 1926 recalled that Ivanov had discussed the idea of using his hospital to implant ape sperm into human women. Ivanov considered implanting chimpanzee sperm into female patients at local hospitals in West Africa without their consent. Given the racist views common at the time, it was seen as more acceptable to do such an experiment on African women than anywhere else. Ivanov believed that these non-consensual hybrid experiments on African women would be much easier and cheaper than continuing with female ape subjects. According to Ivanov, Governor Poiret was originally open to the idea, but soon changed his mind and forbade Ivanov from using any hospital patients in West Africa. Ivanov was furious, calling the governor's refusal a terrible blow to his work. He reached out to contacts in French-controlled areas of Central Africa who seemed more cooperative to the idea of using unwilling African test subjects. But fortunately, budget problems put a stop to those plans. On July 1, 1927, with Soviet funding having run out, Ivanov and his son departed Conakry. However, they brought with them 13 chimps, including Babette, Black, and Civet, to continue their experiments back in Russia. Upon returning, Ivanov and his son received permission to establish the first primate research facility on Soviet soil near the city of Sukhumi on the Black Sea coast. It was the only place in the USSR with climate conditions that could support chimps. By the time they arrived in late 1927, several of their chimp subjects, including Babette and Civet, had died en route, but they had enough left to implant a viable chimp colony. Ivanov's focus was now primarily on using human female test subjects. He made no secret of this, telling Russia's Institute of Experimental Endocrinology in December 1927 that human subjects would be more cost-effective and convenient. Ivanov's colleagues at the Academy of Sciences, most of them being pre-revolutionary figures, were appalled and severed ties with him. Nevertheless, the Soviet government, including Administrator Gorbanov, remained broadly supportive. By now, word of Ivanov's experiments had spread abroad as well, inspiring support and opposition from all sorts of people. In America, Ivanov enjoyed the enthusiastic support of the progressive press and members of the American Association for the Advancement of Atheism, but complained that he received, quote, a shower of abuse and threats to me from fascists led by the Ku Klux Klan. It still took a long time to establish the primate facility at Sukhumi and make all the arrangements. Lacking any viable male primates at first, in summer 1929, Ivanov acquired a 26-year-old orangutan named Tarzan to be used as the sperm donor. As for the human subject, the Soviet government stipulated that Ivanov only use consenting women, rather than the unknowing patients he'd originally planned. Amazingly, he found volunteers. One of his friend's daughters, who was also a gynecologist, agreed to participate. Another woman, identified only as G from Leningrad, also offered herself to the experiment. However, her letter indicates that her mental state wasn't exactly healthy. "Dear Professor, with my private life in ruins, I don't see any sense in my further existence. I beg you, don't refuse me. I ask you to accept me for the experiment." This obviously distressed woman's offer was good enough for Ivanov. Only the sudden death of Tarzan from a brain hemorrhage in June 1929 prevented the experiment starting immediately. All seemed set, and Ivanov just needed to acquire a new pubescent-aged male ape to proceed. In summer 1930, he received 5 adult male chimps for his work and was finally ready to go. Fate, however, had other plans. At the time, a cultural revolution was sweeping through the USSR. Existing elites from politics to academia were facing waves of accusations of disloyalty and counter-revolutionary activity by newcomers eager to prove that they were loyal communists. In May 1930, Ivanov suddenly came under attack from younger members in his field. They had nothing to say about his plans to create hybrids or his proposed experiments on unaware women. Instead, they accused him of counter-revolutionary activity and sabotaging the glorious Soviet Union. Several of his high-level supporters across the political and academic system also fell from grace under a storm of false accusations, including Gorbanov. Ivanov's plans ground to a halt. On December 13, 1930, Ivanov was arrested. The charges were totally without evidence, but that didn't save him from prison and exile to Kazakhstan. Eventually, in early 1932, Stalin ordered him to be released, but the stress of his arrest and exile proved too much to handle. Ivanov collapsed and died from a stroke the day before he was due to return home. For a brief moment, Ivanov seemed to be at the forefront of radical new sciences with the backing of one of the world's great powers. However, it would come to nothing. His son had no interest in continuing his work, and no one else in Russia came along to pick up the torch. Ivanov's plans for a human-ape hybrid were shelved and quickly forgotten. The primate research facility he established at Sukhumi continues to this day, but has since pursued other avenues of research. While other scientists around the world did occasionally toy with the idea in the decades after his death, and rumors of secret hybrid experiments continued in Africa for decades, no human-ape hybrids are known to modern science. The question of whether Ivanov could have succeeded is still unanswered, and there is always the fear that someone, somewhere, will resume his work one day.